Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thank you very much for coming to this session. We are supposed to talk about relationship in this session, and there have been a few points that we wanted to cover. I think these included the concept of relation before marriage, homosexuality, polygamy, and another one. Another one was interfaith marriage. As far as I remember from last time, one of our friends was volunteered to initiate the discussion. I think it was Amara. Am I right?
Sorry, I wasn't here before spring break, so I'm not sure if that was me.
All right, sorry, because I didn't take the name. Who was the student who was supposed to talk about this?
It was me, Juveria.
Oh, sorry about that, Juveria. Of course, sorry about that. I forgot to take notes, and then I went to a trip, so I totally forgot about all the details. So, Juveria, if you're ready, we are all here to listen to what you have to say, please.
So do I just have to talk about my, I guess, an overview of what I think or what my understanding is?
Exactly. Yes, please.
So when I look at it, so starting with dating, I think Islam puts a lot of respect in the relationship between a husband and wife, and marriage is given a lot of importance in Islam, and the sanctity and purity of it should be kept in mind before jumping to dating. As far as homosexuality, it's not encouraged as an alternative. For polygamy, it says in the Quran that at some point in time, men were allowed to have more than one spouse, and based on my understanding, that was allowed based on the situation during that time. So while polygamy was justifiable back then because so many men were lost in the war and there was an excess of women, the same practice doesn't seem to be justifiable in modern times. Looking at interfaith marriage, I think that it's more complicated because it's our duty to pass on our knowledge of the truth to our kids, so that's definitely done best if it's done best if we have a spouse who also shares our understanding of Islam.
Okay, thank you. So that was very, very good briefing of the subjects. Let me now raise a few questions and try to see if anyone, including yourself, wants to comment on. So let's start with homosexuality. So if somebody argues that he out of his control does have trend for homosexuality, it is not in his hand, and he seems that he was born like this, then what would be the stance of Islam or Muslims? Or what should be the stance of Muslims in that situation? Anyone has any comment on that?
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Rahim. This is Alina. In my personal opinion, I don't know if this applies to everyone, but I feel like if someone does exhibit this feeling that they feel that it is out of their control, I don't think it's the job of others to judge necessarily. I think that, God and this religion teaches us to love all equally. And so, you can disapprove of what they are, what they're doing, but since it's out of their control, it's really not our job to judge. That's just my thought. I don't know if that applies to everyone.
Okay, thank you, Alina. Any other views on that? So, Alina, if once you make that argument, if somebody says that, look, have you not read the Quran and the story of the people of Lut, where God basically punished those people, apparently due to homosexuality. So these people then deserve to be punished. What would be your response to that?
My response would be that in that first case in the story of Lut, it was God who punished, not like ordinary human beings. So ordinary human beings really have no judgment to pass on it.
Okay. There's also another thing here, Alina. I'm asking you this question. If there are people who have a tendency for homosexuality, and if it is beyond their control, so it wasn't their fault, then why would God punish them? Because that tendency apparently was in their genes or whatever. So in a way, one may argue that God himself made them like that. So why would then God punish them for a tendency that he himself has put on them?
I don't know how to answer that question necessarily. I think it's a pretty difficult one. But I would say that, God does show a lot of mercy. And I think the story of Lut does have different historical implications than, homosexuality does have now.
Okay, thank you. So let me now move to another subject. So let us talk about marriage and the relationship before marriage. So as Joveri also said, we need to observe some limitations and regulations when it comes to dating and perhaps meeting the person before marriage. So does that then mean that what we call arranged marriage, that is what Islam wants for us? So basically, can we argue that the kind of marriage that Islam likes us to have is arranged marriage, because that is when basically boy and girl will not be able to really be with each other for a long time. Basically, the families introduce them together. They may have one or two sessions, but basically it is arranged, and they will marry like that. Can we say that Islam promotes arranged marriage rather than the so-called falling in love marriage? What are people's views on that? Anybody? Any views on that?
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam. Yep.
I think Islam does, in a way, kind of promote that, because meeting before marriage is not recommended. But I don't think it's like a law in Islam that you have to have an arranged marriage. There are ways that you can meet that are halal, and you don't have to have it where you've never met the person before and you just get married. That's not in Islam's history, like in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time. That wasn't always how people got married either.
Okay, very good, thank you. And let us now move to the concept of polygamy. So Juvaria said that at our time this does not seem to be applied anymore, and this was just a situation at the time of the Prophet. But then again, if you look at the some of the Muslim countries, I'm sure you can find examples in Pakistan as well, but perhaps the most vivid and obvious examples can be found in some of the Arab countries, in particular Saudi Arabia. It is absolutely norm there to have more than one wife, like 2 or 3 or 4 wives. So are we saying that they should not do that because this was something that was only done based on the situation at the time of the Prophet, and today we should not do that? Is that what you are saying, or can we have a different view on that? So what do you think about the concept of polygamy? Anyone? Any views on that, on the concept of polygamy?
Assalamu alaikum, this is Amara. I think that in a relationship like that, as long as everyone respects the decision, then it's fine, because it did happen before, and it's apparently okay, but also just having a relationship between one man and one woman is also just fine.
Okay, thank you, Amara. And perhaps then my last question. Let's talk another follow-up point about this concept of marriage and knowing the person before marriage. So let me be very practical here. Let's say that you are a girl, and there is a Muslim boy who appears to be an honest person, and let's say he knows you from university or whatever, and he likes to know you better, so he suggests that let's go for a coffee or tea somewhere in university where other people are also there, just to know each other, and that would be perhaps a path, a way for him and for you to know each other better, and to see whether this can develop itself in a more serious relationship, in which case then of course you will engage your families as well. Do you see any problem with this, or would you say that with the conditions that I just mentioned, this seems to be fine according to our values? Any views on that?
My name is Lise.
Yeah.
And I personally think that there's nothing wrong with that. And especially if it's in a public setting where there's other people. And also in Islam, there are kind of like conditions of modesty made for the purpose that you can interact with the other sex without it being like inappropriate. So I think if those conditions of modesty are followed, then, and you're in a public place, and of course, like, you know that this is something that's appropriate, that your parents would find appropriate, that people would find appropriate, then I think that there's nothing wrong with it.
Okay, thank you, Aliza. Any views against this? Any different views on that?
Assalamu alaikum, this is Rabia again.
Yep. Go on, Rabia.
I sort of agree with that, and I sort of disagree. I feel, because I've heard a lot of stories where, and obviously these stories don't mean it's true, that, people were in a halal relationship, but it didn't turn out well. So I think to an extent, I guess it's okay, but I feel like you should always have a third person there, even if it's your friend. Like, then you're still talking with the other gender, but you have someone, there with you. You're not completely alone, even if you are in a public setting.
Okay. So what Rabia says is that she says, in principle, this is fine, but it is much better if the third person with you, even if you are in a public setting. Okay, thank you. I think we had a good collection of views on these topics so far. So let me share my slides with you, and you see what is my views on some of these things, and then if needed, we can discuss these. So, right, show my screen. So hopefully you should be able to see my screen now. And I start from here. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So just to remind us where we are. We are here. We are looking at relationships. We only have another 4 sessions to go. So next session we will look at the category of what you may call it entertainment things like music, painting, games, TV, social media, etc. After that, we will look at women in Islam. Then we will look at Muslims and terrorism. And the last session will be how to improve our spirituality. And then we may have another session after that just to summarize the whole thing and to answer any questions. So for today, the thing we want to look at is relationships. And there are in particular four things that we want to look at: dating and before marriage relationship, homosexuality, polygamy, and interfaith marriage. So one by one, the way I want to do this is that for each one of these, as usual, I bring up a verse. I will then try to elaborate on that verse and to come up with some practical conclusions. So when it comes to dating and before marriage relationship, the verse that I refer to, and we have this expression a number of times in the Quran, is when the Quran describes the believers. And it says, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِفُرُوجِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ. And believers who will be successful in the hereafter, these are the ones who protect their private parts, which basically is an expression that is used to refer to remaining modest in their social interaction. So as I think Juwairi and some of the other friends already said, the main thing to come to look at when it comes to relationship before marriage is to remain modest. Modest in Arabic is haya. And unfortunately, I cannot think of any particular English word that would do justice to the word haya and the meaning of it. Modest is the closest one, but basically haya is that respectful standard of interaction with others, where the person does consider some principles on what to do and what not to do. And if any of these principles were about to be broken, the person will feel significant discomfort and tries to avoid that situation. It is this concept of haya that if any of us by accident have our eye looking at something that is inappropriate, we immediately turn our face, and maybe our face goes red as well. This is the concept of haya. And one of the things about this haya is that it is like water in your hand. If you let it go, it is very difficult to collect it again. For instance, if we make ourselves to get used to looking at, let's say, images that we are not supposed to look at, after a while it becomes ordinary for us. And after a while, when we look at it, we do not feel any discomfort anymore. That's not a very good news, because that means that we have basically we have lowered down our standards of modesty and haya. So one of the features of the prophets of God that we read about them is that they had haya in everything that they would do. And we read lots of stories about them. So based on this, therefore, the principle, therefore, is to preserve modesty in the context of interaction with the members of the opposite sex. This means not to have a type of contact that is between husband and wife, or a type of contact that can easily lead to that. So you may say, look, I am interacting with this person who is from the opposite sex, and I really do not have that contact of husband and wife with that person. But we need to understand that that is one thing to make sure will not happen. The other thing is that, okay, you may not have that sort of contact, but it might be in a way that can easily lead to that situation. So we need to avoid that one as well. As long as the above can be observed, then interaction with the opposite sex is not haram. To make sure the above is observed, it is strongly advised to avoid being alone with the member of the opposite sex. And I think that is what one of you were also referring to. So we are living not in a very traditional society anymore. We are living in Western countries where we do see that boys and girls interact with each other easily, and that in many cases this interaction does not really involve any intimate component in it, and it's just simple interaction. We can, of course, get engaged in this interaction as well. It is needed for our studies, for our work, etc. But all we need to make sure is that that modesty will be maintained. Now, I try to be very talk about this in a very practical way. So, number one, if it is only boy and girl alone in a place and nobody else is there, is this haram or is it not haram? What I would say is that it is not recommended. It is highly recommended that there should be a third person there. There can be situations where, look, it is not at all about dating or before marriage relationship. Let's say this is just, I mean, let me give you an example of my own. So I'm working in university, and the head of the department, my head of department, it's a she. It's a female. It's a lady. So sometimes she calls me to go to her office because she needs to discuss something with me. It will be very impractical and very awkward if whenever I go to her office, I also ask someone else to follow me. That cannot happen. It's almost impossible to do something like this. As I said, it will be very awkward. In situations like this, that it's just a working relationship, it's just a educational relationship, etc. If it is not possible to have a third person, I would say that's fine, because at least in this society, we know that if the two persons, the two people are good people, normally nothing bad should happen in between them. If, however, the reason boy and girl are meeting is really to have some sort of getting to know each other, to see whether they can develop this relationship, then again, in principle, there is nothing wrong with that. But as some of you said, it is always better and recommended that a third person is there, or that you are in a public. Now, whether if you are in a public, whether you need a third person to be with you or not, I prefer not to make that as a rule. I prefer to leave that to the person himself. Perhaps with consultations with her parents or his parents, he would come up with a conclusion, what is the best thing to do. I think I really don't want to come up with a general rule to say, no, in the public, definitely you need to have a third person with you, or definitely you do not need to have a third person with you. I think that is something that we need to leave to individuals to decide about, considering and observing all these rules that I talked about. It is important, therefore, to understand that things like women's seclusion or no direct interaction with the member of the opposite sex or arranged marriage, these are all cultural phenomena. They have nothing to do with Islam. So I asked you this question, can we then say that Islam promotes arranged marriage? My own answer to this question is absolutely not. Arranged marriage is something totally cultural. Now, we may say that, yeah, arranged marriage does have some advantages because it will keep that modesty, etc. And let's also be fair. At our time, in most of the traditional families, arranged marriage no longer means that boy and girl will not see each other and they just marry with each other because the parents have said that. Normally what arranged marriage means in most of the traditional families is simply that the two families find that this boy and that girl may be good match for each other, and they just arrange for these two to meet each other and to sit down and to discuss with each other. So if they liked each other and they thought they could live with each other, then the marriage will take place. So in a way, you may call it like arranged dating rather than arranged marriage in this way. If you look at the history of Islam and history of Muslims, if you go back to the time of the companions of the Prophet, for instance, the concept of arranged marriage was not like the only way of marriage. Yes, there were some of the marriages that would take place in an arranged way, but there was also marriages that would take place just by boy and girl knowing each other. And the best example I can give you is the Prophet himself. How did the Prophet marry Khadija? It wasn't arranged marriage at all. It was simply the two of them knowing each other. And then it came to the point that the Prophet felt that this marriage can be made, and then actually the couples arranged for the elders to come together and make it formal. So, as long as the above can be observed, both arranged marriage and the so-called love marriage can be acceptable options for marriage. Now, I need to explain a little bit here what I mean by love marriage. What I mean by love marriage is a marriage that is not based on arranging it before. The marriage where boy and girl tend to come and know each other by themselves, and then they let the parents know that, look, I found this girl, I think she's a good choice, or I found this boy, I think he's a good choice, and then the parents will get involved and they get engaged in the rest of the formalities and ceremonies. That is what I mean by love marriage. So I don't mean that sort of love marriage that is not really appropriate for a good, moral and modest person. So that is about dating and before marriage relationship. And if there is any question about this, I'm happy to look at that. I will summarize this point at the end as well. The second point is about homosexuality. Again, the verse that I wanted to bring to your attention is this one. When God talks about the people of Lut, and God narrates what their prophet said to them. This is what the prophet said, Prophet Lut. Do you approach men and obstruct the road and commit in your meetings evil? And the answer of his people was not, but they said, bring us the punishment of God if you are truthful. This actually points to what one of you said very correctly. And this is something that many of us Muslims are making mistake about it. In fact, even Christians, many of them make mistake about it. Question: did God punish the people of Lut only because they were they had homosexual tendencies? Answer: no, definitely no. And this verse is explaining that. See, what the people of Lut the crime that they had done and the reason they were punished was a collection of evil things that they were doing. One of them was homosexual tendency, and we can safely conclude that that was an intentional one. That wasn't something that they were born with, because it was a huge amount of them that were doing this. You know that if it is something that people can argue that it is natural and it just comes with genes, etc., it's going to be only few individuals, like our own societies. But the way that we read about the stories, it seems like the whole men, or most of them, were going towards that route. So it was a very intended and in-control decision to go into that path. So number one, the homosexuality tendencies that they had was something that they could control. They decided not to control. Number two, as you can see here, تَقْطَعُونَ السَّبِيلَ, obstructing the road, which many of the mufassirs, many of the commentators of the Quran are explaining that to mean they would rob people and they would actually rape them. And تَأْتُونَ فِي نَادِيكُمُ الْمُنْكَرِ, in your meetings doing some evil. And apparently this evil that they were doing was so bad, so evil, that the Quran did not even mention it, did not even find it appropriate for the readers to read what they did. So what they did was actually a collection of lots of evil things, and at the top of that, they had a prophet of God coming to them, Hazrat Lut, and the prophet of God were warning them. And the answer that they would give was as simple as this: bring us the punishment if you are right. So they were also arrogant towards any guidance that God was given to them. So my conclusions are as follows. Homosexuality is not acceptable in Islam because it is against the nature by which the human being was created. And also it's against obvious rules of physical purification. It is against the nature simply because if you have a society where all of them, each and every one of them, are homosexual, then that society will perish in 30, 40, 50 years because they will not be able to reproduce. That much we do know. So it is against the nature. Some people say, oh, but there are some animals that have the same relationship. That doesn't matter. The fact that some animals may also do it does not make it natural. What tells us that it is not natural is the point that I just made, that if you have a society, all of them having homosexual tendencies, that society will perish because they will not reproduce. And it is not in accordance with the nature by which human being was being made. The people of Lut were not punished due to homosexuality per se. They were punished for a criminal behavior that involved homosexuality as well. So those who have homosexuality tendencies due to any inherited disorder are not sinners, as this was not under their control. They therefore should not be subject to any punishment, not in this world and not in the hereafter. God will never punish anybody that has done something out of his control. So the question that I ask one of you, that if there is somebody who has homosexuality tendencies and it is out of his control, he was born like this, then why would God punish him in the hereafter? I think the answer that you should go for is that who says God will punish him? We have in the Quran, La yukallifullah nafsan illa wus'aha. God will not put obligations on you in a way that it would be beyond your capacity. So if it is beyond the control of somebody, God's justice tells us that he will not be punished. And also, as one of you said very, very correctly, it is not our job to judge about others that what is the reason that they are homosexual. I have seen some of my friends and some of my colleagues sometimes making comments that, oh, homosexuality cannot be out of control because of this and that hadith or this and that verse. I totally disagree with these sort of comments. That is the area of medical science. That is the area of science. That's not the area of religion. We should not make any comments on that. We leave that for the experts. Then comes to the concept of polygamy. So if you read the verse where it talks about the possibility of men having more than one wife, you will find that basically here the main objective was to take care of orphans. So I read the verse for you. And if you fear that you cannot treat orphans with justice, then you may marry with the women who seem appropriate to you, 2, 3, or 4 of them. But if you fear that you cannot maintain justice among them, marry one only. There are two views about this. That who are these women? That here it says you can marry with them 2, 3, or 4. Some say these are the mothers of orphans. So my teacher, Javed Ahmed Ghamidi, seems to have that view. Some say, no, it is the orphans themselves, those of them who have reached the age of maturity. That doesn't matter at the end. What really matters is to consider here that, look, the verse was not at all after prescribing how many wives to marry. The verse was looking at an issue, and that issue was how to treat orphans in a just way. And the verse is trying to give a solution based on the social norms at the time. So the Quran's concern was never about number of wives for marriage. Rather, it was about protecting the rights of the orphans. The Quran has utilized a cultural norm of polygamy among the Arabs at the time to address the issue of orphans. Even there, the number was limited to 4, because Arabs could marry more than 4 before Islam. But even there, the Quran makes the limit, the ceiling, for them to be 4, and there is a condition, and the condition would be justice. However, important point to consider is this one. Since God created one and only one wife for Adam, and that is Hawa, therefore it can be concluded that one spouse is naturally enough for a person. See, when God narrates the story of Adam, then God says that, so we created his spouse for him, so that he would find peace, he would find confidence, he would find sakina, as we say it in Arabic. So when God says, I created a spouse for him, how many spouses did God create for him? The answer is only one. So if naturally, what we can conclude from this is that if naturally man would need more than one wife in order to satisfy all his requirements and desires and to be in a peace, etc., etc., then today we would read in the Quran and in the Bible that God created Adam, and then he created like 4 Hawa for him. Hawa 1, Hawa 2, Hawa 3, Hawa 4. That was not the case. God created only 1 Hawa for Adam. So from this we can naturally conclude that as far as God is concerned, 1 wife would be enough for the man. Or as some people say, 1 wife is more than enough for a man. At our time, we need to follow the regulations of our country of residence when it comes to polygamy. In any case, limitation of 4 and condition of justice needs to be observed. So because this verse came down trying to resolve a problem with the orphans, and it used the norm at the society in which the Prophet was in order to resolve that situation. So because it was based on that norm, we can conclude that in every society that we have, we need to see what is the law, what is the norm. If first of all, to start with, as I said in the last point, I cannot see why a man would want to marry more than 1 wife. But if there is any reason for the man to do that, then it all depends on in which society and which country that man is staying. If it is in a country where this is illegal, then he cannot do that. If he is in a society where this is not considered as moral, then he should not do that. If he is in a society where this can be done, like some of the Muslim countries, like Saudi Arabia, then okay, it may be done, but then again, these 2 conditions need to be met. The number should not be more than 4, and justice should be the condition. Justice to have a fair basically providing for all the wives. Last one, interfaith marriage. So the verse that relates to this one is this verse in Surah Al-Ma'idah. Lawful to you are the chaste women of the Muslims, and also the chaste women from among the people of the book before you, when you give them their daughters with the condition that you desire chastity, not lewdness, nor becoming secret lovers. And they who reject faith shall gain nothing from their labors. And in the world to come, they will be among the losers. So what we find from here is this. Marriage of Muslim men with women from the people of the book is allowed. We see the verse is saying that. As long as the true message of monotheism, which is Tawheed, is going to be upheld in the family. look at the end of the verse where it says وَمَنْ يَكْفُرْ بِالْإِيمَانِ, and the one who where is it? The one who rejects faith. So as you can see, the emphasis is on Iman. So you cannot imagine that at the time of the Prophet, a verse of the Quran comes and gives permission for men to marry women from people of the book, where there was possibility that after this marriage, that man would leave his faith. You cannot imagine that that would be allowed at the time of the Prophet. So the condition really here was that the true message of monotheism needs to be upheld in the family. Now, then comes the number of elaborations on this. So some scholars, like Javed Ahmad Ghamidi, argue that in non-Muslim countries, since this cannot be guaranteed, therefore such marriage is better to be avoided. So basically, what, for instance, Javed Ahmad Ghamidi says is that because the condition is that the message of Tawheed needs to be upheld in the family, and because in non-Muslim countries, obviously Muslims are not dominating and they do not have social power or cultural power, therefore, in non-Muslim countries, this is not very encouraged, and marriage between Muslim men and Muslim women is not encouraged. According to the vast majority of scholars, since the above verse is silent about marriage of Muslim women with men from people of the book, therefore such marriage is not allowed. There are few scholars who argue that if the above condition can be maintained, then this is also allowed. So let me explain that again. If you look at the verse, it is only talking about marriage between Muslim men and Christian or Muslim women. Sorry, I said again. The verse is only talking about marriage of Muslim men and Christian or Jewish women. The verse does not make any references about marriage between Muslim women and Christian or Jewish men. So the verse is silent about the marriage between Muslim women and people from Ahl Kitab. Now this silence has been interpreted in two ways by the scholars of Islam. Vast majority of them say this silence means it is forbidden. So Muslim women should not marry non-Muslim men, even if they are from Ahl Kitab. There are a few scholars who say that no, actually the silence does not mean forbidden. The verse has only about the concept of men, Muslim men marrying, if that condition can be maintained, which means upholding the concept of Tawheed and monotheism in the family. If that can be maintained, then there is no difference between Muslim man or Muslim woman if they want to marry from Ahl al-Kitab. So these are two different views. So let me summarize the points. In terms of the marriage relationship, the main thing is, the main concept to think of and observe is modesty. As I said, arranged marriage is not something that we would say this is what Islam wants. What Islam does want is that the two people before marriage, if they are interacting with each other, it will be with all modesty and purely for the sake of knowing each other better. Normally, the best way of that happening normally is that the two people let their parents know that, look, I see this boy, or I'm going to see this girl. We are going to sit down and talk about a few things to see how we are thinking about things. And then it is better for it to be. It is better for it to take place in the public. And as some of you suggested, it is advisable to have a third person as well, but I wouldn't go as far as saying that this is obligation. Homosexuality, it is a disorder. So I fully disagree with this trend that goes on and tries to make this homosexuality as something totally normal. No, it is disorder, but it is not. That does not mean that we are disrespecting people who are having that tendency. If we say that, look, being blind is a disorder, it's a physical disorder, are we disrespecting the person who is blind? No, we are just stating something that we consider to be a fact. So yes, homosexuality is a disorder. However, those who have developed this due to factors beyond their control cannot be blamed and are not punishable by the Almighty. Polygamy, Islam has never prescribed polygamy. That verse that I referred to needs to be looked at within the context. And if we do that within the context, we do realize that really the main subject and issue was to take care of orphans. And Quran only took benefit of social norm that was existing at the time. Interfaith marriage, the main issue to consider is whether the true message of monotheism or Tawheed will be upheld in the family. So that would be the summary of my main points, and I'm now happy to listen to your comments and questions. For the next time, inshallah, next Sunday, we are going to look at music, painting, games, TV, social media. These are some of the things that some people say these are against Sharia and these are haram. So really what we want to know is that what is the criteria for considering something haram? What is the essence of Sharia? When we say Sharia, what is the essence of it? What is the objective of it? And where is the red line about these things? And again, I'm going to ask by the end of this session for one or two of you to start and initiate the discussion by giving us his or her own views about these subjects. So that's me. Too much talking. I stop this, and I'm listening to your questions and comments if you have any.
Assalamu alaikum again, this is Alina. I wanted to ask something about the dating and before marriage relationships. If we're considering like that if a woman and man are alone, that they will, or like there is a high probability of them engaging in like inappropriate contact, why is it an assumption we have to make right off the bat? Like why is that the initial assumption that we have to make?
I wouldn't say that is an assumption to make. As I said, like the example that I gave you about me meeting my head of department, that is not at all an assumption. I'm talking, number one, let's clarify what sort of woman and man being alone we are talking about. As I said, in the working relationship, you have seen and you will see a lot where a man and woman may need to be together alone in a meeting, etc. I wouldn't say that in a professional working relationship where both of them are good people, something like this will happen. I'm just talking about the situation where it's not a working situation, and really it's a situation where a boy and girl are sitting together, not for any working requirement, etc. It's not an assumption. It's a risk. There's a difference between the two. If you say it is an assumption, then it will become a rule. It will become something that will say that, look, it will be haram if you do something like that. When we say it is a risk, then it will go back to the wisdom of the two people. I would then say it is highly recommended. It is not appropriate. I wouldn't be able to use the word haram there. So it's a risk. It's not an assumption. If you then ask me, well, why there is a risk? Because this is the way that boy and girl, male and female, have been created. This is the nature of people coming from two boy and girl. They are attractive to each other. It's just part of the nature. So no matter how much they try to maintain their modesty, that risk can always be there. Now, the reason I'm saying that I'm not making it as a rule is because I do appreciate that we are living in a modern world where some of the social infrastructures have changed, and I can understand an argument to say, look, in this world, in this modern society that we are living in, it can easily be the case that boy and girl are alone, but there's absolutely no risk between them. I can understand that. I have seen girls in my own family who have made the same argument, and have seen that, yeah, they're right. You know, I've been told by some girls, for instance, in my family that, look, for instance, uncle, the situation here is different from like in Iran or from in Pakistan. Here it is totally normal for boys and girls to be with each other with absolutely nothing going in between them. I, perhaps, as a person coming from that culture, I may not be able to fully feel that, but I am able to understand that. So therefore, I'm not saying that it is a rule. I'm just saying it is a recommendation. And I leave it to the individuals and also to their parents to decide whether this is something good to do or not. My assumption is that all the teenagers have developed a good relationship with their parents, and they can easily discuss this with their parents. And the parents are also people of understanding. And if they feel that, look, no, there shouldn't be anything wrong here, they would then say to the boy or girl that, yeah, I think it is fine. So I leave it to the boy and girl, and perhaps to the parents as well, depending on the age of the boy and girl. Of course, the higher is the age, the less the parent may have a say there in practice. Did I manage to answer your question?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Any more comments on this? So see, basically what I'm trying to say is that, you see, on these issues in terms of dating and before marriage relationship, etc., etc., what I'm trying to say is that, look, we have a huge cultural standards, many of which are actually very good. I'm not saying they are bad, but they are cultural. And then we have very accurate and very definite rule according to religion. That accurate and definite rule according to religion is that modesty needs to be maintained. That is the rule. The rest of the things, like, okay, it's better to be in the public, it's better to have a third person, it's better that parents know about it, maybe some sort of semi-arranged may work better. All of that is coming from culture. And when I say they are coming from culture, that does not mean that they are wrong. In fact, they are very good. Some of them are very good. Okay, so I may not be a fan of pure arranged marriage in a way that boy and girl do not know each other at all. I don't think that is good. But the other things that I just mentioned, I think actually they're very good. I love to see that a boy or girl, no matter what is their age, they have such a healthy relationship with their parents that they can easily tell to their parent that, look, there is this boy, and he seems to be a good boy. He seems to be interested to see whether we can develop a relationship that may lead to marriage. And we want to meet, let's say, in that coffee shop. Is that okay? And I love to see parents to be understanding enough, understanding that they are not living in Iran or in Pakistan anymore. They are living in this Western world. They're understanding the differences here. I love to see for them that they also look at this with open mind. And if they find that, yeah, actually that sounds to be a good choice, they say, yeah, okay, yeah, you go and you have my blessing, and just let me know what happened. So that Islamic point, keeping modesty, that is not negotiable. That cultural one, that goes back to every case and every individual. And every case and every individual, people need to decide what is the best thing to do. That cultural thing itself can help with that modesty, but only if it is being done in a rational way, not overdoing it and not underdoing it. Brother Shukaib, do you have anything to say? Any comments? At the end of the day, this is the community with which you are more familiar with me.
I really enjoyed your lecture. I think these are the questions on Muslim teenagers' minds, and you address them all. A lot of times there is a tendency to discard all the cultural stuff that comes with your parents, the baggage, if you call it, or any which way you look at it. But you just have to be mindful, the core concept that Dr. Rahim just explained, modesty. These cultures, may it be Pakistani culture or Iranian culture or any other Muslim cultures that the first generation immigrants came from, these cultures started from that modesty and evolved all these practices over time. Some went too far with time, but at the bottom of it is the same thing, the modesty. They are trying to ensure that maybe if we do this, that will ensure modesty. So, the core concept, just remember that, and I think that's the takeaway from this particular subject.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and I think you said what I was trying to say in a perhaps better words. When I said that these cultures they are actually trying to help with this modesty. You are absolutely right. Most of the elements of this culture, I wouldn't say all of it, but most of the elements of this culture started with that modesty, and many of them are still very helpful. What I would like to think is that, you see, that religious point, to keep modesty, that is the criteria forever and for any location. We can never say, oh, we are living in a time where modesty is not important anymore. No. That is for every time. That cultural thing, I would like to think that parents are open-minded and educated enough that whenever they find that, look, some of the elements of this culture are not working anymore and are not serving its purpose anymore, they would then replace those elements with something better, with something that would work. And for those elements that they would find that, yeah, it actually works, then they try to discuss that with their children and explain for them, why this is something that can benefit you. Any more comments or questions? Okay, so like last session and the session before that, I need at least one, but ideally two people to initiate the discussion for the next session. And as you saw from today, it does not need to be a very extensive one. You just come and simply share your views about the subject. You don't need to read anything about it. You don't need to do any research about it. If you do so, that's good, but you don't need to do that. If I can quickly share my desktop with you, you can still see the title here. Forget about these three, because you may find these three to be a bit too technical, so forget about these three. The main thing is this one. So the question would be, in your view, in your understanding, whether a Muslim can get engaged with music, let's say arts like painting, whether if it is okay for a Muslim to get engaged with games, whether it's okay to watch TV, Western TV, whether it is okay to get engaged with social media, etc. That is the question, and I would love to see one or ideally two of you becoming volunteer to start and initiate discussion for this for next time. Anyone?
I can do it. This is Amara.
Thank you, Amara. Anyone else?
I can do it too. This is Rabia.
Very good. So we have two volunteers, Amara and Rabia. So again, just to reiterate, so the question simply is your view on, put yourself in my place, okay? Let's say you are a student of Islam. You are fortunate or unfortunate enough that people ask them some questions about religion. So you have received a question. The question is, I am a boy or a girl of 18, 19, 17 years old. I have a talent for music, or I have a talent for painting, or I really love to sit down and play with PS4, or I would like to spend time with TV, watching movies, etc., or I spend time in Facebook, Twitter. Some people say it is haram, some say I should not do it. What do you think? I just want to know what would you say in answering that question. So, inshallah, we will hear from you next time. And Brother Shukak, please do remember the names, and I try to write them down as well.
One quick thing, if I can add before they go. I personally feel that this today's class was the one that you may want to retain a recording. So I'm tempted to, along with the notes of the class, send all of you a link to a recording of today's session for you to keep for later. Please do not post it on YouTube or anywhere else. This is purely for you, for privacy reasons. Just keep it with you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and inshallah we will talk again next time. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.